Welcome to ever increasing. In our last session together, we were talking about how does God get the wealth to us. In Deuteronomy 8:18, it says that it is the Lord your God who gives you power to get wealth. Our subject, of course, is the purpose of prosperity. And the very fact that Deuteronomy 8:18 says it's the Lord who gives you power to get wealth lets us know that God is not opposed to wealth. But now the question is, how does God get the wealth to us? Well, as I started to say last time, there are two primary ways. Number one is tithing, and number two is giving for Jesus' sake, or rather giving for Jesus' sake and the gospel, or in other words, investing in the gospel. Now, before you go off the deep end about tithing, because I know we're under the new covenant, and right away you might be tempted to say, well, tithing was under the old covenant, so we don't have to tithe. You want to reserve that opinion until we get finished with some things I'm going to share with you, because I think you'll have a different light on it. Okay, so let's go to Malachi chapter 3, because that's where we're given specific instructions about tithing. How does God get the wealth to us? He gets it to us through tithing and through giving for Jesus' sake and the gospel. All right, Malachi chapter 3. Malachi chapter 3. Very familiar verses, and even though they are found technically in the Old Covenant, they didn't, and you'll see this a little later, they didn't, or tithing did not originate with the Old Testament. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. They think that because they find it in the context of the Old Testament, that meant, well, it's Old Testament. Actually, it was in operation before the Old Testament was issued, and it was incorporated into the Old Testament so that those under the Old Covenant could be blessed. All right, so let's read it and find out what happened. Verse 8 says in chapter 3 of Malachi, God himself is speaking. He says, will a man rob God? Okay, that's a very interesting statement. Will a man rob God? Well, what constitutes a robber? In other words, how does a person get the designation as being a robber? You're right, taking something from someone else or someplace else that doesn't belong to them. So therefore, if God says, will a man rob God, then he must be getting ready to tell us about something that belonged to him that we took. Now, we might have done it unwittingly, unknowingly, but you're still a robber if you take something that doesn't belong to you and you get caught at it. Okay, he says, will a man rob God? He says, yet you have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. So that tells me then that the tithe belonged to God before man was brought into the equation. Because otherwise, we wouldn't be considered robbers taking something that doesn't belong to us if it didn't already belong to the Father God. So he says, you ask, how did we rob you? And he says, in tithes and offerings. So therefore, that tells me that the tithe belongs to God. And since God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, then that would mean the tithe would belong to God in the past and the present and the future. And I'm out of time, but I'll see you again.